know him through his Ask David column in the CMTA report. He's brilliant. He's been very involved for a very long time. He's a psychotherapist. He's now doing a lot of Zoom meetings and calls through his home in New York. He's been a therapist for over, what, 30 years?
35.
Yeah, 35 years. He's also on the CMT advisory board. He's very involved with the CMT community. And I can't thank him enough for his involvement. He sheds so much light and on subjects surrounding CMT, because David also has CMT. So he really knows from the inside out what people are going through, and talk to a lot of people with a lot of different things: anxiety, depression, disability, et cetera, et cetera. So welcome, David. Thank you so much for coming on. So today we're going to talk a little bit about mental health and mental health in today's society. And I was speaking with a friend the other day, David, and she said, these last 3 years or 2 years have been the worst in my whole entire life. I've not been able to get out. I'm inside, my muscles are atrophying. I feel depressed. I'm finally taking medication for anxiety. And I just wanted to ask you, have you been dealing with a lot of anxiety, depression with your clients? And if so, where do you see this going? I mean, there's so much going on in today's society. Let's start with that. Let's just see how you feel the world is going now. And are people suffering more these days, less, or is it just whatever's happening now is coming out even more now with the pandemic and everything else going on in the world?
Well, it's interesting, Elizabeth. I know this might sound strange, but in some ways, this pandemic has been easier on some people than others. Like personally for me, since I'm not terribly active and don't go out a lot, I sort of feel like the world is catching up to me. So it hasn't been a terrible burden. Okay, but having said that, you're absolutely right. There are people, so many of my clients who are perfectly physically healthy have been having a really tough time. I think what's most difficult is the isolation, particularly in New York. People who live in small apartments, they're not able to see their friends. It has been difficult. On the other hand, it's actually given people an opportunity to be very reflective, to be really looking at what's important in their life. What do they miss? What do they want to, work on in their life? Sometimes when we're so busy, we just put all that stuff aside, busy, busy, busy. Sometimes when we're less busy, we have these opportunities to really reflect. So, what's important to me?
So David, when I sit and reflect, I just get anxious. That's why I like to say busy. So, I like to say busy so I don't have to think. And this whole thing has made me think a lot, and I have a lot of anxiety. So how do you help people with anxiety and just trying to get through the day-to-day? Because, there's job loss and there's just so much going on in the community. And, could you give us some tools on how to deal with day-to-day anxiety and some of the depression that might come out of this whole thing? Sometimes I just feel like I'm just alone.
Well, let me give you a kind of a funny example that happened actually this morning. So I'm sitting here looking, actually it's quite pretty out. It's in the Northeast, it's snowing, it's really lovely, it's very quiet. So my dog, who generally does his business, in the morning, and by the way, he hates the snow. He absolutely hates the snow, but he goes out, and when he comes back in, he immediately he finds his favorite heating vent, and he just sits by the heating vent for about, I would say 10, 15 minutes, and then we feed him. Perfectly at peace, perfectly happy. I don't think he's thinking, I wonder if my master's going to put up the heat today. How come he didn't take me to Florida like my neighbor next door? Is he going to feed me? I don't think he has any of these thoughts. I just think he's completely and totally in the moment. And to me, actually, my dog Pico is one of my teachers. When I look at him, I see that, his mind is not full of chatter. His mind is not going a mile a minute like most of us. Most of us just don't stop thinking. Just don't stop thinking. So, to answer your question, and we'll explore this in a bit. I don't think the answer is to try not to think or to keep busy. I'm not sure busy is great, focused is great, but I think one of the real answers is to just pay attention to the chatter. Just observe the chatter in your head. Don't attach yourself to the chatter. Don't become the chatter. Just observe it. Just see it. And oddly enough, just by doing that, just by watching it, guess what? Those thoughts seem to become quieter. It's so simple. It's not trying to get rid of the thoughts. It's not trying to think of something in particular. It's simply observing your thoughts in a non-judgmental, observational, non-critical way. That's it. And guess
that sounds like a mountain, like I'd have a
meditation,
mountain to climb. Like, how do you do that? Like, so you just so you're talking about mindfulness? Is that what that is?
Absolutely. And by the way, Elizabeth, we can't do it 24/7. If you can do it, start with 10 minutes a day, and I don't mean necessarily a sitting meditation practice. Just be aware of, I'll give you an example. So, a couple of days ago, it was really, actually, it was a nice balmy day here. And I was sitting, really enjoying my backyard. I was watching the birds, watching the trees, just doing my thing. And feeling actually pretty relaxed. And then all of a sudden, I started to get a little anxious because I started to think about the place I was going to dinner tonight. What are the chairs going to be like? Is the table going to be wobbly? Is the floor going to be slippery? Will I be able to drive there easily? On and on and on. And I would say for about 10, 15 minutes, I was completely lost in this mind swirl of anxiety. And guess what? It totally took me out of the moment. It took me out of the moment, enjoying this beautiful, 10, 15 minutes of simply being outside. So when I was able to kind of see that and catch it, okay, I thought, all right, I was doing my thing again. I was getting lost in my thoughts. You take a breath and you come back. That's the practice. You observe that you're making up a story. And by the way, that's what we do. We are constantly making up stories. 99.9% of those stories are never true, but we continually do them. And if we can, if nothing else, if you can, recognize that that's what we do most of the day, we make up stories. And when you see yourself making up those stories, I'm doing that thing again. I'm making up my story. Take a breath and come back. When I say come back, literally breathing, it really helps because, when you listen to your breath, that's a way of coming back. And then maybe another good idea is to just, coming back is paying attention, okay, to the room that you're in, the chair that's underneath you, the window that's right by you, that's coming back. Anything to get out, this sounds funny, but anything to get out of your mind, get out of your mind. The mind is incredibly important for things like, yeah.
So you're sitting there and you're like, because I think the same way, like, is there going to be a hill? Am I going to be able to make it? Am I going to sit? Am I sciatic? So you get cut. So you breathe, you pause, you breathe, and you come back. And then those thoughts just go barraging again. So how do you
That's right.
you just keep breathing? Like, I could do that all day. Do they go away eventually?
I promise you, you might have to do it. It's not a one-shot deal. You might have to do it a few times. And again, you can't catch yourself all the time, but the more you do it, it becomes almost second nature. You just simply observe it in a gentle way. Don't don't beat up on yourself thinking, oh, I missed it, or I should have done this. None of that. When you can, do it. If you can't, that's okay too. And by the way, if you can't do it in the moment and 10, 15 minutes or a half hour goes by, even if you recognize that, about a half hour ago, I was totally lost in my worry. That's okay too. Just don't allow the worry to spin into some kind of narrative where you're this kind of anxious ball of tension 24/7.
That's
That's
interesting.
practice.
Yeah. And you just talked about don't beat yourself up. I think we need to, I find that the negative self-talk does not help. And I think we need more compassion towards ourselves. I was reading your website, and it has some just wonderful quotes, and it just reminded me, you have to love yourself and feel compassionate for yourself before you can be compassionate for others. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And this compassion for yourself thing, it seems like a kind of a platitude or a throwaway line. But, when you're going through a rough time, every once in a while, I'll get up, or I'm about to get up, and I think, oh, this is not a great day. I'm just not feeling great for whatever reason. And I'm down, I'm blue. I mean, I don't know what else you can say, but the compassion for yourself is really can become become part of being gentle with yourself, knowing that, okay, so this is not an easy day. This is a tough morning for you. Okay. It's okay. By the way, this CMT stuff is hard. Come on. I mean, it takes a lot out of us, and part of having a chronic condition is sadness, is depression, is anxiety. So compassion for yourself is just recognizing, that it's kind of normal in a lot of ways. Yes, do we want to recognize it and try to feel better as the day goes on? Sure. But don't beat up on yourself because if you're feeling some of these negative thoughts.
Because it's a natural thing, right? It's a natural
thing. It's very natural.
I mean, I'm sure in a day you go from happy to sad to anxious to joy to, we're all over, right?
And that's, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I once read a kind of a definition of mental health, and it said something like, in every given day, we go through the entire range of feelings: sadness, joy, fear, anger. The issue, the main point here is that we go through it. You don't want to get stuck in any one feeling. You want to feel the feeling, express it if you can, and release it. Recognize the feeling, feel it, and let it go. And that's the practice all
just
day.
Like let it go. Let it go. Is that how
let
you do
it go? Yeah. And guess what? Well, I don't know if I do that, Elizabeth. But I take a deep breath, and I don't even have to say let it go in my mind. Just by allowing yourself to feel the feeling fully in your body, it passes away by itself. And guess what? Sure, it'll come back at some point. Do the same thing. The thing not to do is to make more of a story up. You can have the initial feeling, let's say, of anger or fear. I'm angry at this or I'm angry at that, but don't hold on to it. Don't, again, create a long narrative about this particular feeling. Just feel the feeling and let it go. We do far too much thinking. We don't have to think as much as we think we do. Right. Thinking is great if, you get it, you get in your car, you have to know how to work the car. You go to work, how to put food in my bird feeder. That's like productive thinking. Most of the thinking that we do is incredibly unproductive, unnecessary.
Do you believe that we choose the way we feel?
Guess what?
Sorry, I just interrupted you. I think there's a little delay, and I'm not sure if it's on my end so I just interrupted you, and I apologize for that. Do you feel like you can choose how you feel?
That's a good question, Elizabeth. I think that we have a choice. Yes, how we respond to certain things. We have a choice. There was a very famous psychiatrist who I've talked a lot about, Viktor Frankl, who went through the concentration camps. And one of the things that he came out with was that he realized that there was a space between what happens to you and your response to it. Oh. There's a space between what happens to you and your response to whatever happens. And he said, the most precious possession we have is our ability to choose how we respond to every situation. How we respond to every situation. So, once again, there's a difference between pain. They say, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional.
Could you
We can't
explain
always
that?
control
Could you
the
explain
pain that we.
Yeah, explain that a little bit more. Pain is
Well,
inevitable,
the pain,
suffering is optional.
I'll give you an example. If I get up in the morning and I have a, take my pick. If I have a pain in my leg or my foot or my back, that's a physical sensation. But my interpretation of that is, oh my God, I have this pain. What does that mean? What's going on? Am I dealing with some atrophy? Am I going to get through the day? I mean, on and on and on and on. Listen, and I'm a master at worry. I'm a Jewish guy from New York. We know how to worry, and we know how to create a story about worrying. So I can't control the sensation of the physical pain in my leg, but guess what? I really do have some control over how I'm going to see it, how I'm going to respond to it. It is what it is. That's a kind of another one of these throwaway lines. When people say, oh, it is what it is. I always thought that's such a dismissive line, but actually it's quite profound. It is what it is, without the judgment, without the criticism, without the evaluation. It simply is.
Yeah.
So, for example, my dog Pico this morning, sitting in front of the heating vent. It is what it is. I mean, he was happy. He didn't think about how long he was going to sit there. He didn't think about getting breakfast. He was in the moment. And that's, by the way, the real key here. So many of the spiritual teachers talk about the need to be in the present moment. And my God, for those of us with CMT, I cannot tell you how important that is. Because as soon as we start to project into the future, we're in we're in hell. We're in hell. So we just do it automatically. So we project what's going to happen next week or next year or 10 years from now, So when I find myself doing that, I got to come back. I got to come back to this moment.
That's such good advice, because with a progressive disease, right, with CMT, which is progressive, I can see where you can easily go there. But as you said, those moments may never happen. You could, see somebody and see yourself in their position that's so much worse, but that might not even happen. Do you think it's really 99% of what we project into the future, really, it doesn't even happen? There's just so hypothetical.
Absolutely. But again, it doesn't even matter on some level if it happens 15 years from now or 20 years from now, or it doesn't happen. It's right in this moment that I want to feel peace. I can't control what happens 20 years from now, but I can control in this moment if I'm anxious. Now, by the way, let me just say something about, depression and anxiety, which again is, a very normal response to what all of us go through. There's a difference between sadness and depression. Sadness is something that I just think, all of us experience at one point or another. By the way, everyone experiences sadness, but I think we have some very particular reasons to experience sadness. It's not weird. It's just part of, I think, living with CMT. But depression, is something a little different. Depression is about, feeling hopeless or helpless, or shut down, or we stop eating, or we have experience no joy in our life at all. That's depression. And again, do we experience sometimes depression every once in a while? Sure. But if it lasts for more than 2 or 3 weeks, then it's time to get some help. What is that help? Talk to a therapist, get some medication. I don't care what you do, get some help with it.
What if you don't have money for a therapist? You need to have something. I mean, there must be resources out there, to find somebody that you can talk to.
There are resources. It doesn't have to, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. There are online resources. There's, listen, joining the support group in CMTA is actually quite important. to feel less isolated, to feel less alone with this, but you have to take some action. And by the way, I want to say this too, that we think sometimes, if we're going through like a rough morning, we have to take a big action or do something big. No, it's really about the small actions. For me, if I'm going through a rough time, I think, okay, let me turn over and put my braces on. That's step one. Put on my braces, get up, get some coffee, brush my teeth, feed my dog. These are little goals. They might sound silly to some of you, but actually, in some ways, it helps to feel like you have a purpose, that you have some kind of tasks in your life that you need to do. Don't just lie in bed. Worst thing you can do.
And when you're depressed, isn't that all you feel like doing? So you sort of have to fight with yourself or convince yourself to get up, because the last thing you want to do when you're depressed, and really depressed, not just a little bit sad, but just really depressed, is get up and do something, right? How do you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, again, depression is like, I often describe it as like putting on a pair of like green glasses, with green lens, and everything you look at is the same color. Everything you look at is the same color, that's what depression is. Okay. So again, one, have compassion for yourself, because again, it's our form of suffering when we feel depressed. Okay. But on the other hand, we have to do something. Even if we have to take a little step, call a friend, decide to get some help, that's when they talk about being good to yourself. That's being good to yourself. Take care of yourself. Don't just think that, oh, there's nothing that I can do. And even if you're going through a mild, depression, I don't mean a clinical depression, but say you're depressed for the day. Okay. So do something that makes you feel good, go outside, breathe, have a good meal, play with your child. I mean, there's so many little things that one can do to just lift your spirits.
So I'm gonna thank you, David. That's all such good information. I wanted to ask you about, do you wake up in the morning and grab your phone and start doing things, or do you take a minute and check in with yourself? Because I've been trying to do this in the morning. I wake up and usually I'm like on the phone, who's emailing me? Because I'm 3 hours difference from the East Coast. So everybody has already had 3 or 4 hours on me, right? I get all stressed out first thing in the morning. So here I am trying to breathe and check in with myself. And then I have to figure out a different way to do it, because the cat's walking across my face and then pawing me because she wants to eat. And then Johan's alarm goes off, and then Jill's getting up, and then the croissants are beeping in the oven. I'm like, I can't even check in with myself. So how important is that? Do you do that?
You have croissants in the morning? I'm very impressed.
Yes, of course, this is a French family.
So listen, oh, silly me, I forgot. Okay. So, it's a good question. What I actually often suggest to people is, don't start the day that way. Give yourself a little period of silence before you start being on the devices. Because guess what? First of all, you turn on the news and most of the news is pretty sucky. It's not great news, so you're immediately filling your mind up with all sorts of negative stuff. Anxiety, fear. I mean, it's just, I'm not saying don't pay attention to what's going on in the world, but in the morning, give yourself some quiet time, ease into the day. Don't barrage yourself with that stimulation, because that's what you're doing. You're overstimulating your mind. You're adding to these thoughts. So ease into the day slowly, gently. Maybe just pick up the phone once to see if the world is still there,
You're not alone.
That's it. Give yourself an hour or so before you get back into that. Right.
And I think a lot of this technology creates anxiety too, because, you know, on Facebook and then the news and then the phones and then the texts and and I know we're just so into that in the society, but recently I've been trying to take a step back from that, right?
Absolutely. And just because Elizabeth, just because everybody does it, doesn't mean that you have to do it. You know? So if the goal here is peace, if the goal is really peace, we want to do everything we can possibly do to create that in our head, create that in our hearts, peace. And peace needs a certain kind of slowness without all the bombardment of stimulation. So, I can say to you that when I became aware of how cluttered my mind was, I really began to really make a concerted effort to just quiet the noise. The devices, the TV, all that stuff is simply noise. That's why I love,
You're so grounded. And I think people like talking to you because you are grounded. Like I'm floating all over the place. You're grounded and I want to be like you. I do.
Okay.
I want to be
you better think carefully about that. But I work on it. I really work on it. This is not something that comes naturally to me.
Right. And I think a lot of people don't understand. You're just not, you can't just be grounded. It's work. It takes time every day.
Absolutely. No, that it takes a certain kind of, recognition that, first of all, it's a desire to want to be more grounded or want to be more peaceful. If that's not important to you, then that's not important to you. To me, actually, because I was such an emotional guy and so reactive, I didn't really want to live that way for the rest of my life. And guess what? Having CMT was perfect, perfect fodder for being anxious and depressed and frightened. If it wasn't CMT, it probably would have been something else. But in my life, it was CMT.
Do you think if you have peace translates to happiness? Do you think happiness is achievable? And I know that's just such a broad term, but I see everywhere, achieve happiness. You can be happy. Join Happify. Happy, happy, happy. Is
well,
that even achievable?
That's actually a good question. To me, happiness is peace. To me, happiness is peace. When I was 20 or 25, happiness was, peak experiences. Climbing a mountain, traveling the world, that was happiness. Great food, great sex. Those were a desire for those big experiences. But guess what? Those experiences, they come and they go. They come and they go. They never last. But peace is something that actually is achievable to last. And to me, at this point in my life, at 71 years old, peace is really joy. Happiness, there's a difference between joy and happiness. Happiness is very fleeting. Happiness is a pleasurable experience. Joy is a lot quieter and much more, can be much more constant.
Thank you.
Now, by the way, don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean that you can't have, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I didn't hear you. Just continue. You're good.
No, I'm just saying that it doesn't mean that you can't have wonderful experiences, but don't expect that those experiences are going to last forever. They come and they go, so this is a very Buddhist in nature. Don't attach yourself or cling to any particular experience. Life is very transient,
you're so right, because
nothing is permanent.
We live for those moments, like, going on vacation and you have such a great time on vacation, you come back and then everything just seems to, and I'm like, oh, I just need to live on vacation.
Right.
And I can't live on vacation. So David, I want to get to some questions from our audience. And I know that they probably have a lot of questions to ask you, or maybe some comments that you could comment on. But I also forgot to mention that not only do you have a website, but you do have an emotional support group that's on the CMTA website. that is not
Yeah.
on Facebook and is much more private. And you've done a wonderful job with that group, growing it and creating a secure, confident community. And I just wanted to mention that to everyone. If you didn't know, please join it. It's we'll give you the information afterwards.
Great, great.
Laurel, do you want to see if anyone has any questions?
Yes, I opened it up to the chat. First, I'd like to apologize. I didn't realize David has a website, so that's awesome. And secondly, my power completely flickered on and off, so I had to come back into the meeting and I lost everything in my chat. So I am not seeing any questions. We can also raise our hand like Barry has done. So Barry, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, that'd be great.
David, can you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you. Yes, yes.
You
I
talked
can't
about
see you, but I can hear you.
you talked about the mile a minute syndrome and nonstop input. I deal with that, and the best way, and I guess this is just to share with the group that best advice I ever got was a psychologist in Wisconsin here that spoke at a meeting I went to. And I asked her if she saw a huge increase in stress and anxiety and depression in today's society. And she said that she thought that what their figures showed was it all started around 9/11. And I said, well, okay, but we're way past that. And she goes, but that was the beginning of nonstop news. She said, and people are addicted to nonstop news today. How do you feel about that?
Well, as I said to you before, I absolutely, agree with her in some ways. That with the technology that we have now, it's 24/7. It used to be, 25 years ago when I was growing up, at 6 o'clock, you turned on the news for like 20 minutes and that was it. Now with CNN and MSNBC and Fox, I mean, you're constantly bombarded with it. So guess what? What do you think that does to you after you're inundated with that kind of bombardment of stimulus? It's sort of common sense. You're not going to feel great. It's going to be much more difficult to find those places of quiet and peace and tranquility in your mind. So we can't stop the fact that, yes, this is the way the world is today. News is 24/7, but you can recognize that it's not doing great things for you and to take news breaks. Just take news breaks. If the news doesn't change a tremendous amount from 1 hour to the next, so it's not like you're going to be missing something. But I do beg people to just take breaks. Just sit. You don't necessarily have to be stimulated. You can that's why I love actually, I'm very fortunate to live in a rural area of New Jersey. So, I can just sit and watch the birds, watch the trees. I don't have to be, I don't have to fill my mind up with news.
My wife and I got to that point where we discovered the on-off button on the TV. and also on the phone. And it helps. It really helps. So I would suggest that anybody try it.
That's great.
And
thank
guess
you,
what? I discovered something, that, and I was so guilty of this, dinner time, I would so automatically like put on the TV. I'm embarrassed to say. And I realized that I did that for years because it was just almost like an automatic response. And when I stopped putting on the TV, well, number one, you actually can have a conversation with your spouse, which is great. Two, my digestion improved, 3, I just felt better. These are not rocket science ideas, but they're little things that you can do, again, to achieve that kind of quietness and peace in your mind.
Thank you.
I like that.
Next.
A question came into the chat, David. Kathy asked, what are some of your best recommended apps or podcasts, etc., for calming mindfulness or mindfulness?
From what I hear, I think one app that I know clients of mine have used is this app called Calm, which is the one I know about, which is the one that people really like. But I'm sure, listen, it doesn't, any app, some are better than others. Experiment. But I think that's a great, a great way forward to experiment with some of these apps, just to be able to take a few minutes out, listen to them in the middle of your day, and achieve that kind of tranquility. It doesn't mean you can go right back to your work. You're not going to zone out. You're not going to lose focus. You're not going to like become, so scattered or overly, you won't have the ability to kind of get back into your work, but just take the break for 5 minutes.
I just wanted to mention that Cheyenne, and I've heard this app before and I haven't used it personally, but Inside Timer, this is the second or third person that's told me about this app, and Cheyenne, that's helped you. And it looks like Denny has helped Denny too. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so it's a free app that basically teaches you and guides you through meditation practices. There are different types of meditation as well. So if you want to reduce anxiety or want to just do like calming meditation or more mindfulness, there's different like techniques that you can look at, grounding techniques as well. And so there's like anywhere from like 5-minute meditations to 30-minute, 45-minute, just to kind of get you in the practice of being able to learn how to meditate, what that looks like for you. And it's free. It's been really awesome. If you have no idea how to meditate or what that even means, go ahead and look on that app, and it's self-explanatory of the different groups that it has. So I really liked it.
Oh, that's
So
fantastic.
So Pinocchio said he can meditate for two seconds, and I hear that like you said, 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, I hope to have a 1 minute, session, because that's all I can manage. So I hear you, but I think you can gradually build it up. It's like a muscle.
Well, let me say something about it, and that's a very common, common refrain I hear all the time. I can do it for 2 seconds, and that's it. So I would say don't worry so much about the actual sitting down and trying to kind of calm your mind. You can use other ways. In other words, you can bring meditation in your life simply by, for example, if you're doing the dishes, literally, if you're just doing the dishes, do the dishes. A very famous master said the goal of the goal of happiness, whatever, awakening or true awakening, is doing one thing at a time. Doing one thing at a time. So if you're folding the clothes, fold the clothes. Don't go off in your mind somewhere. Be there. Be with the clothes. Be with the towels. Sit. Focus. That's actually what meditation is about. It's just focusing and trying to not pay attention to all the extraneous thoughts that come when you're trying to do one activity. Just do the one activity. That's bringing meditation into your life. And sometimes actually even looking outside, just gazing at a flower. Flowers there's a stillness about a flower. There's a stillness about the trees. Just trying to just breathe, be with that for a few moments. That's meditation too. Not everybody can sit and do a sitting meditation.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
We have a couple. Danny will be with you in just 1 second. I had one more from the chat that I want to jump on because it's really important for our community. And David, what is your guidance for someone who found so much meaning in work, but because of their CMT, they had to stop working and they really want to work, but they can't because they can't keep up with the pace and they're really struggling with a lack of purpose?
Oh.
Well, and that is so difficult. And my heart goes out to anyone who, has lost their job or realizes they can't do their particular job any longer. And there's, when we have to, at first come to terms with those feelings, that there's clearly grieving and sadness around that, But, the other thing is, I think we have to, reframe or rethink about what it is, what brings purpose, we don't necessarily have to go for the
Yeah.
perfect job, we don't have to go through, we don't have to go, if we can't do it, we can't do it, but just being in a situation where that gives us some kind of activity or some kind of meaning, yes, there is sadness about not being able to do what we've trained to do, but that doesn't mean we can't find purpose and meaning in other areas. I mean, I can't tell you what that is, but I can tell you that you can do it. You can find that. It might be not what you thought you should have done or could have done, but there's a lot that we can do. If you have a brain, if you have the ability to speak, if you are, if you want to connect with people, there's plenty you can do. But yes, do we have to come to terms with, I just can't do this one particular thing any longer, and that sucks? Yes, it does suck.
Yeah,
But
thank
our
you.
life
That's
isn't over.
helpful. Yeah. Denny, if you want to go ahead.
Yes, this was enormously helpful. And I really got what I think David is saying about the difference between pain and suffering, and it having to do with meaning that we're giving things. Much of the time, the meaning is from long ago things about shame, about having something wrong with you. That's a lot of and punishment. And you deserve this, and your needs not being met. But you know what? When you get so you can kind of work through a lot of that stuff, as hard and awful as that is, it becomes easier to deal with the day-to-day stuff. I wanted to say on the Insight Timer, Yoga Nidra is one. For me, I literally get in the bathtub a few times a week and in the middle of the day when I need to, and turn this stuff on. I swim, and these are my ways of coping. But I swear that having this has been enormously helpful to me. I didn't have this before.
That's great.
That's
Thank you.
That's great. I mean, we really, I want to say something. I mean, we really do owe it to ourselves to work at trying to feel as good as we can feel. Just because we have CMT, yes, there are things that we can do, but there's so many things that we can do, and one of the things that we can do is to try to adjust our responses to what happens to us. That we can do. We can adjust our feelings about what happens. Okay, we can work on our self-esteem. We can work on our learning to relax. These are things that we can do. We might not be able to work on climbing the mountain that we want to climb, but there are other things that we can do.
excellent. And Dalius, I see that you have a question if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm a dinosaur on the system. I'm Susan Savage. That's my husband's.
Oh, Susan, gotcha.
Hi.
Anyway, hi, everybody. Okay, with Barry, I agree with you. The news is, I'm first generation, and it's very frightening. I try, to distance, like David said, but I can't put my head in the sand on this. But anyway, I go by a philosophy that I have a will to live. My girlfriend has always referred to me as I'm standing still and somebody comes along, who knows who, probably CMT, and pulls the rug out from underneath me. I get blindsided from time to time. Just recently, within this last month, and you get in this place, nope, this is not happening. Nope, I don't feel this. Nope. But it's reality. And I
Do you,
give myself.
do you have a, Susan, do you have a question that you want to ask me?
Yeah, well, how do I get up and out of this? I'm calling it now fear. I have come this far in life. I'm getting tired of climbing back out.
All right, well, I think that's, let me try to address fear, because I think fear is probably one of the biggest issues that all of us have to deal with, and what I often say helps is that we can't avoid the initial feeling of fear. We just can't avoid it. It comes, it happens. It just comes into our psyche, But what you can do is when the fear happens, as soon as you are alert to the fact that this is fear, okay, simply by labeling it, this is fear, feel it in your body, don't resist it, it's there. Allow yourself to experience it, and guess what? It will pass on its own. Don't resist it, don't deny it, it's there. What I will say is don't create, in addition to the fear, extra thoughts, extra stories, because that's what we do without knowing it. We just create an extra story that's totally unnecessary. So once you're aware that you're creating an additional narrative and you can recognize it and let it go, the fear comes and it goes. You won't cling to it if you can just recognize it. That's all.
Thank you.
Wonderful, David. Thank you. Thanks for sharing, Susan. Cheyenne, I see your hand up.
I have a question about how do I stop comparing myself to normal able-bodied people, or like comparing myself to what I used to be able to do and now I can't do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would love to say to you that I never do that, but I do it all the time. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A famous Indian teacher used to say, comparison is an American disease. Comparison is an American disease. So the best I can tell you, and it has actually helped me, is to simply recognizing at the moment, I'm doing that thing again. I'm doing that comparison thing. Just stop it. It's not that there's anything weird about the instinct of comparing yourself. We do it. But guess what? Let me ask you, so how does that working out for you? Comparing yourself all the time.
Doesn't help at all.
No, it makes you feel like awful. It's a very common experience. But again, it's the same thing. Just recognize, oh, I'm doing that comparison thing again. Take a breath, come back, let it go. Because, most of these things honestly are just conditioned behaviors. They're just habits. They're habits. I do the same thing. I look at some of these like ninja warrior things on TV, these guys that are like, climbing the walls and jumping over mountains. I'm thinking, Jesus, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'd like to do that, or maybe was I ever able to do that? Actually, quite frankly, no, I was always a terrible athlete, but now at least I have a good reason not to be a good athlete. But yeah, but comparison is like just a normal thing. Just recognize that you're doing it and let it go.
Thank you.
Good questions coming in. We have a couple more minutes. I'm just seeing if anyone else has hands up. It's been a lovely discussion. Iris, is your hand up? If you want to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
My question
Yes.
is, now that I'm going to be 70 years old in 2 weeks, and I have a wonderful support with my husband, who's really a doll, but I'm concerned about how much of my declining abilities as I get older should I or should I not be sharing with him? In other words, I don't want to become a burden to him, but I'm noticing my decline more and more and more. So of course I'm terrified. But at the same time, I've never been one to do that. People look at me and they say, oh, they admire me. You never complain. You're so good. I don't even know you have anything wrong. That was years ago, by the way. And so I'm not sure how to manage for now and the future in terms of how much to rely on a very good spouse that I'm lucky enough to have.
When you say how much to rely, you mean how much to share with him?
Both that and asking him. Like I noticed in the last 2-3 years, I've been letting him do more and more of the car driving. And I used to drive myself everywhere. And I'm not sure how that quite happened. So I feel like it's a slope that I'm on, you know?
So how long have you been married?
This is my
How long have you been married?
second marriage. We've been married over 30 years now. And I've
Okay. So
always prided
let me
myself
just
on being capable, but I can't do it anymore.
okay. You're right. So if the shoe was on the other foot, if it was your husband that was
Right.
sharing more and more or needing to rely on you more and more, how would you feel?
It would be perfectly okay. I wouldn't mind. And he would probably
So
answer,
what makes
he
you
would
think that
probably answer the same way, but that doesn't change my doubts.
So right, so that's it. So you answered your own question. It is simply your doubts. It's not the reality. The reality is he loves you. He wants to be there for you, you know? And by the way, it's a very male thing to want to be protective, to want to take care of. Why don't you just let him take care of and get over your own weirdness about feeling dependent? We all are dependent in some ways. It's okay. It's part of love. It's part of love and being love to allow ourselves to be dependent. It is not a weakness, Iris. Dependency is not a weakness. It's part of love.
Okay.
And can
Thank
I
you.
add, David, I was speaking with,
And actually,
sorry, I was speaking with Bethany the other day, and she kind of expressed herself in the same way. And the way she's had a mindset is, you know, my husband does a lot for me, but I also give him and do a lot for him in other ways. So I'm sure,
Right.
you know, like, you know, and so she feels as if like in the morning, she says, what can I do for you while you're at work? Can I order this, this, and this? So it's a different way of supporting your husband, that just different than what you've been used to.
Mhm.
and you know, I want to say something,
Thank
by the
you.
way, allowing your husband to do a little bit more for you, allowing your husband to do a little bit more for you, and for you to accept that is also a form of intimacy, Iris. It's intimacy. You know, so don't cheat yourself from those moments of allowing him to take care of you. And Elizabeth is it's very true. You, I'm sure, take care of him in many other ways.
Yeah, that's true.
Iris,
So
my wife always reminds me not to steal her joy.
By taking care of things.
right,
Yeah.
right. Don't Barry, that's a good point. You know, don't deprive your husband of the joy of taking care of you and loving you. You know, so you're concerned about being overly dependent, or you know, that's your thing. You know, that has nothing to do with him. Let it go.
But it sucks.
Yeah, that I agree. It absolutely sucks.
Thank you
But it
so
sucks
much.
more if you don't talk about what you're feeling. It sucks more if you're trying to sort of like be, you know, superwoman or
Mhm.
spare him of what you think that will be painful. That sucks even more. Don't
Right.
isolate yourself in your relationship.
Okay.
Yeah. Excellent. Really wonderful discussion. This is such a treat today, David. Thank you. And we are so
My pleasure. My
incredibly
pleasure.
grateful for your time as always and everything that you do to support the CMT community with your articles and meeting with us. And you're just a gift. So I thank you and I thank Elizabeth and we thank
Thank
you all for
you.
being with us today. Elizabeth, any final words from you?
No, I just want to say thank you all for coming in. And I just feel like we need to do this more often. I'm just getting a lot out of this myself too. So I thank everyone for being vulnerable and coming in and expressing themselves and listening. And thank you, David. You have words of wisdom and I really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. And we'll get this recording up on the website in case you want to watch it again and get a few more nuggets out of it. But have a wonderful and safe weekend. And thanks for being with us.
David, what is your website?
Oh, good question.
David, what is your website? It's David Tannenbaum.
David Tannenbaum Therapy.
Okay, so, and we'll put that in the notes, right, Laurel? We'll put all the references.
I can
to
send
David's
some
stuff.
follow-up notes. Yeah, David
Okay.
Shannon website. You got it.
Okay, bye.
Take
Thank
care,
you,
everyone.
everyone. Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.